Good afternoon, everyone. It is February 26th, and I wanted to talk about the Russian offensive that has been ongoing for about 4 or 5 weeks now, as well as the potential upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive that may be taking place in the late spring as Russia culminates their current offensive. So, Russia's current offensive, and obviously I'm looking at a map of Ukraine here, it runs a specific line here, and I'll highlight that line. It runs a line basically from just outside of Svadova right here and runs down through here through Bakhmut, which is where a lot of the fighting is, and then all the way down currently to Volodar. That's basically where Russia has currently focused on this winter offensive. A lot of experts, myself included, did not expect this offensive to take place this early, and the reason is because the terrain and weather does not lend itself to very good fighting. This whole region can become quite a mud pit, as we've seen, and a lot of what has happened with Russia is they are unsuccessful here. I mean, the lines really haven't moved. The only places we've seen some significant growth in territory, let me clear this out, is in Bakhmut, where they've taken this little bubble right here, as well as some areas up in here where they've taken a little bit here. But the Ukrainian tactics here are to trade ground for troops. So Russia is sustaining significant amounts of casualties, and the American Enterprise Institute, Institute for Study of War, the British Ministry of Defense, as well as Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, all concur that these are World War I level casualties Russia is sustaining. In fact, there's casualties were so high. Bakhmut is the region where Wagner Group is struggling and getting killed the most. Interestingly, Russia doesn't roll the Wagner Group PMC deaths up into their numbers, so they are purposely hiding them. Some estimates show that they've lost anywhere between 30 and 40,000 troops in the Bakhmut region when it comes to this offensive, and largely Wagner Group is being replaced by Russian units surging in. The problem for Russia is they have no one in reserves. They have no one back in the rear to backfill. What they're using is human wave tactics, which is largely artillery, barrages, clear the artillery, move troops in, take ground, and try to hold it. That has been largely unsuccessful across the entire front, other than these two areas that I've shown. So what's going to happen for Russia? Well, because they have no reserves, because they launched their offensive operations earlier than they should have, because they hadn't reconstituted completely with troops coming out of Russia, for the conscriptions, a lot of what we're seeing is the same old, same old. They're struggling to conduct standard battlefield tactics. They're not integrating any kind of combined arms. Their strategy involves just heavy artillery because they have no air support, because they have no other method of movement other than the small, almost battalion level movement tactics. They're not conducting small level squad tactics within a combined arms theater here. So what we're seeing is small ground being taken with massive losses of troops. And a lot of people are concerned that Russia will surge in more troops for the larger offensive that's supposed to be taking place in the spring. I don't think they're going to have any more success. I mean, since then, the Russian military has been weakened by the Ukrainian counterattacks, especially these costly battles near Bakhmut, but they are using poorly trained conscripts at this point. Last year, when Russia was conducting offensives, those were trained active duty troops. Those troops are no longer on the front lines, or if they are, they're severely depleted. Their capabilities are nowhere near where they were in the spring of 2022. So Russia is largely going to culminate on the battle lines we've seen right now sometime in the next few months. I don't expect them to grow any further. Meanwhile, Ukraine is receiving huge amounts of Western equipment, including Abrams, well, not Abrams, those aren't supposed to be coming until later in the fall, but Leopard tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, which are going to be a massive game changer on the battlefield because they are a tank killer, but also fast and can carry troops. Just a great multi-purpose vehicle for the Ukrainians coming out of the United States, as well as other pieces of equipment. And even more important, around the late April to late May timeframe, 60,000 troops that have been training in Germany under U.S. tutelage in the United Kingdom, in Canada, in various other Western military. 60,000 Ukrainian troops are going to return to Ukraine to start fighting. So at the same point that Russia's largely was predicted to be a failed spring offensive culminates is when Ukraine is going to have 60,000 additional Western trained troops, huge amounts of Western equipment and intelligence, and a severely depleted Russian forces that have spent all their forces trying to take silly targets, frankly, in Bakhmut, as well as up in the Svadova area up here. So, what does a potential Ukrainian counteroffensive look like? And mind you, this morning, the Ukrainian Intelligence Bureau came out and discussed what their potential counteroffensive is. Now, this could be a misdirection tactic, but it largely falls in line with what I suspect would be where Ukraine would conduct a counteroffensive. So as we move down towards the Zaporizhia Oblast, there is a series of roads and interconnected highways here and rail, specifically in Tokmak here and Melitopol here. As much as we would love to see Russia liberate Mariupol over here, right in this area, that is not the strategically sound play right now. What is strategically sound is likely trying to cut Ukraine or Russian logistics off to Crimea. So if we zoom out, you can see Crimea down in this region here, and then where the main battle lines are drawn here. So I suspect where Ukraine and what the Ukrainian intelligence bureaus are saying is a lot of the counteroffensive is meant to sweep down to take this area here and cut off, create a wedge right here to cut Crimea and cut all these troops off as well. So that would essentially cut Crimea off. I've seen a lot of discussion about how the Kerch Bridge should be up and running again, which can resupply Russia right here. But again, that could be attacked yet again. That could be destroyed. But it is most definitely a target going forward. So when I look at this, I see what Ukraine potentially would be to try to liberate Melitopol because there's an airfield. This is an intersecting where many rails intersect here. Also, many highways intersect here. And also, it creates a nice shortened point because of this water feature right here. So Ukraine's ability to drive a wedge through this area and take it while also creating a logistics nightmare to resupply Russian troops over here is likely where I see Ukraine conducting their counteroffensive. Now, it could also be a feint. It could also be like they pulled in Kherson, where they said we're going to attack in the north and then ended up taking Kherson. I don't know if that is the case. Potential fighting could open up where they feint to the south here and open up to try and retake places like Severodonetsk and whatnot over here. Mind you, this region right here, where the Ukrainians would look to try and fight, is pretty heavily fortified for Russians. This may be one of the areas where we see parity in casualties, but unlike the casualties Russia is taking, where they're not taking any land, more than likely because of the rapid capability and the innovation of the Ukrainian army supported by Western equipment and Western intelligence, likely will be trading casualties for land at a more acceptable rate, meaning we would see less Ukrainians die per kilometer of land taken than what Russia has seen, and that's largely because they're going to be better trained, better equipped, and not have just culminated a failed offensive on their own like Russia has. So those are my thoughts right now on what I foresee to be the future of this current winter/spring offensive for Russia, likely going to fail and culminate sometime in the late March, April timeframe. Then you could see in May potentially Ukraine conduct their own counteroffensive operations. Now, make no mistake, this doesn't mean that Ukraine is going to win the war. This is just a next step in the battle. There's going to have to be a series of Ukrainian offensives over the next year to essentially win back enough territory and beat back enough Russians to win this war.